She had lost everything. Her husband, her home, the small threads of comfort that had once held her life together, all gone, swept away by a cruel twist of fate. The village that had once whispered tales of her modest happiness now turned its back on her. Hunger had become a constant companion, gnawing at her from the inside, and the bitter cold of winter seeped into her bones, leaving her shivering even under layers of tattered clothing. Each morning she awoke to the same reality: an empty cupboard, empty streets, and the cold wind that carried only the laughter of others and the unspoken judgment of those who had once called her neighbor. She had tried to survive in small ways, trading her skills for food, begging at the market, doing odd chores, but the world seemed determined to strip her of dignity at every turn. The village had little mercy for a widow, and even less for a woman alone. Men looked at her with lust or indifference, women whispered behind her back, spreading rumors that only made her isolation sharper, her shame heavier. Nights were the hardest. As she huddled beneath a threadbare blanket, she felt the weight of the life she had once had pressing down on her, and the fear of what the future might hold gnawed at her even more. By the third week of winter, desperation had completely consumed her. The cold was relentless, the hunger unbearable, and she realized she could no longer survive by begging or scraping together the scraps left behind by others. Her pride, once steadfast, crumbled under the pressure of raw necessity. She had heard rumors of women in similar situations, of women who had sold themselves, traded their bodies for the warmth of a fire, a meal, or a few coins. The thought made her stomach turn, but the reality of her situation left her with no choice. If she did not act, she would die in the snow, alone and forgotten. The night she made her decision, the village square was nearly empty, the air thick with frost and the echo of distant laughter from those who had gathered at the inn. She wrapped herself in her heaviest cloak, tightened the scarf around her neck, and stepped into the dark streets with a resolve she had never known she could muster. Each step felt heavier than the last, her heart pounding with fear and shame. She could feel the eyes of the world upon her, judging her before she had even taken a single action. When she arrived at the designated place, the strangers were already waiting, men whose faces were unreadable, whose intentions were clear. Her stomach churned as she handed herself over, the coins they offered clinking coldly in the night air. She wanted to cry, to run, to scream that this was not who she was, but her body refused to move. She was paralyzed by a mixture of fear, necessity, and the crushing weight of hopelessness. Every coin in their hands felt like a chain tightening around her, each one a reminder of how far she had fallen, how desperate survival had made her. As the night deepened and the cold pressed in from all sides, she found a shadowed corner, shivering beneath her cloak. Her mind replayed every humiliation she had endured that day, every choice that had led her here. She wondered if anyone would remember her, if anyone would care that she existed at all beyond the brief, transactional interaction of survival. Tears streaked her cheeks, freezing in the bitter wind, but still she did not move. Even in her shame, even in her fear, she could not summon the courage to leave. And then, from the edge of the square, she saw him, a figure carved out of the twilight, moving with a quiet, deliberate purpose. The mountain man. He had heard the murmurs, perhaps sensed the injustice of the world pressing down on her, and now he approached, his eyes sharp but kind. For a moment, she thought he might be another predator, another obstacle to endure. But as he drew closer, there was no malice in his gaze, only curiosity, and something else, something foreign and entirely unexpected, concern. The crowd, sensing a shift in the air, began to disperse. The laughter that had haunted her all day faltered, dying on the lips of those who realized they were no longer the center of power. The mountain man stopped a few feet away, studying her silently. He said nothing at first, simply watching, letting the weight of his presence envelop the space. And for the first time that night, perhaps for the first time in many months, she felt the faintest glimmer of hope stir within her chest, a fragile spark that whispered, maybe survival could mean something more than shame. That night, as the wind cut through the village and the shadows deepened, she realized that she had survived more than hunger and cold. She had survived the world's cruelty, and somewhere on the edge of the square, a figure waited to show her that survival could also mean protection, kindness, and perhaps, even the first hint of trust. The mountain man led her away from the cruel eyes and whispers of the village, each step through the snow-laden path making her feel both lighter and more vulnerable at the same time. The biting wind cut through her thin cloak, but the warmth of his presence, solid and unwavering, created a strange sense of safety she had not felt in months. His eyes never left her face, not with judgment, not with desire, but with a quiet intensity that suggested he understood more than she could imagine. The cabin came into view as the moon rose higher in the sky, its warm light spilling from the windows onto the snow, promising shelter from the relentless cold. It was small, built of dark logs, and nestled against the slope of the mountain, smoke curling gently from its chimney. The widow's heart both raced and sank. She had never been inside such a place alone with a man before, and fear mingled with a flicker of hope. She wanted to protest, to assert her independence, to insist that she could survive on her own, but her body, cold and trembling, betrayed her. Inside, the cabin was a haven. The air smelled of pine, burning wood, and the faint aroma of cooked stew. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, casting flickering shadows across the walls. The mountain man moved with deliberate care, lighting the lamps and placing a thick blanket over a chair near the fire. His hands were large and steady, and there was a calm authority in the way he moved, a presence that demanded neither obedience nor attention, yet commanded both. "Sit," he said, his voice low and steady, carrying neither judgment nor expectation. She obeyed, her legs numb and unsteady, her fingers clasping the edge of the blanket as if it were a lifeline. He moved to the hearth, adding a log to the fire, and then gestured toward a small cup of steaming tea. "Drink this. It will help," he said. The simplicity of the gesture, the absence of mockery or exploitation, made her chest tighten. She had come to expect the world to take everything from her, but here was someone offering warmth without cost, care without condition. As she sipped the tea, she glanced around the cabin, taking in the modest furnishings, a sturdy table, shelves of books, tools neatly arranged along the walls. Everything was functional, practical, and lived in, yet there was an undeniable sense of comfort. She realized, with a shiver that had nothing to do with the cold, that this was a space where she could be herself, even if only for a few hours. The mountain man watched her closely, but not intrusively. When she finally met his eyes, he nodded ever so slightly, a gesture of reassurance. "You're safe here," he said simply, almost as if stating a fact rather than offering a promise. There was no pity in his tone, no condescension, only a quiet acknowledgement that she deserved safety, warmth, and dignity. Hours passed as they settled into an unspoken rhythm. She spoke little at first, unsure what was expected of her, still weighed down by shame and hesitation. He never pressed, never demanded, never looked at her in a way that made her feel like a commodity. Instead, he offered quiet companionship, the kind that comes from genuine care and presence rather than words. He tended the fire, repaired a loose floorboard, fetched more tea without comment, and occasionally glanced at her, ensuring she was comfortable. Gradually, she began to speak. Her voice was tentative at first, barely above a whisper, but as he listened with undivided attention, it grew stronger. She spoke of her life before the tragedy, of fleeting moments of happiness, of dreams that had been shattered. She spoke of fear and loneliness, of nights spent shivering in the dark, and of the crushing weight of shame that had driven her to the choice she had made. Every word was met with patience, not judgment, every pause was respected, not rushed. By the time dawn hinted at the edge of the night sky, she realized that the mountain man had not only given her shelter but had also offered something far rarer, a space to exist without fear or condemnation. She felt a flicker of something she had not felt in a long time, trust. It was fragile, tentative, and unspoken, but it rooted itself in her heart. For the first time, she allowed herself to relax. Her body, once rigid with cold and anxiety, softened. Her mind, once consumed with dread, found a moment of clarity. She understood now that survival could be more than mere endurance. It could mean care, compassion, and even the first glimmer of hope. The night of humiliation and desperation had not ended in despair. It had led her here, to a cabin where warmth was given freely, and where the presence of another human being reminded her that she was still worthy of life, and perhaps, of kindness. Morning light filtered through the cabin window, painting the wooden walls with a soft, golden glow. Snow still blanketed the mountain outside, glistening in the early sun, but inside, the fire crackled, warming the small space with a steady, comforting glow. The widow sat wrapped in the thick blanket, her fingers tracing the edges absent-mindedly, a mixture of fear, shame, and gratitude swirling in her chest. She had survived the night, yet she could not shake the weight of the choices that had brought her here, the memory of selling herself for survival still etched painfully in her mind. The mountain man moved quietly, tending to chores with deliberate, steady motions. His presence was calm, authoritative, yet non-intrusive, allowing her the space to breathe, to think, to exist without feeling scrutinized. Occasionally, his eyes would flick toward her, not with desire, but with genuine concern, and unspoken reassurance that she was safe. Each glance chipped away at the walls she had built around her heart, walls constructed from shame and fear, and she felt herself soften in ways she hadn't thought possible. She wanted to speak, to apologize, to explain herself, but the words felt heavy and inadequate. I'm not used to this, she finally murmured, her voice trembling. No one has ever cared for me without asking for something in return. The mountain man paused, turning to look at her fully. His expression was unreadable at first, then softened, revealing the depth of his understanding. Then it is time you see that you deserve it, he said quietly. His words were simple, but they carried a weight that seemed to press gently against the shame she had carried for months. The hours stretched on, yet the air remained intimate without pressure. He offered her food, hot and nourishing, but allowed her to eat in her own time. He stoked the fire, repaired a loose shutter, and shared stories of the mountains and his life here, tales of solitude, survival, and respect for the harsh land that had shaped him. Through these stories, she began to see him not as a man of strength meant to intimidate or command, but as a guardian, someone whose life had been carved from resilience, discipline, and quiet compassion. Still, when he reached out, gently guiding her hand toward the cup of tea, she flinched, pulling back with a soft but firm, "No." Her voice was almost lost in the crackle of the fire, yet the mountain man heard it clearly. He did not push, did not question, did not scold. He simply respected her boundaries, sitting silently across from her, allowing her autonomy to remain intact. The respect he showed, even in moments of tension, struck her deeply. She realized, with a jolt, that he had not come to claim her body or exploit her desperation, he had come to honor her humanity. Time moved differently in the cabin. Minutes stretched like hours, yet they were filled with a strange comfort. She watched him work, admired his careful movements, and felt a connection growing that went beyond gratitude or safety. There was trust now, fragile and new, threading itself through every shared glance, every unspoken acknowledgement of the night they had survived together. For the first time since her loss, she felt a flicker of hope that she could exist in this world without being consumed by shame, hope that someone could see her value without judgment, hope that she was not beyond redemption. As the day wore on, the snowstorm outside began to ease, the first hints of blue sky peeking through the clouds. The mountain man stepped outside briefly to check the perimeter, and she followed cautiously, wrapped in a heavy cloak. The sight of the vast, white mountains stretching endlessly around them was breathtaking, almost overwhelming. Yet in that vastness, she felt a small but potent sense of belonging, not just in the world, but beside this man who had shown her care without condition. When they returned to the cabin, the atmosphere had shifted subtly. She no longer felt like a shadow, a desperate figure clinging to survival. She was a person, fully and irrevocably, capable of being seen, heard, and respected. The mountain man offered her a seat near the fire, and this time, when he reached out with a reassuring gesture, she did not pull back. She let him close enough to feel the warmth of his presence, enough to know that she was no longer alone in the world, yet still free to choose her boundaries. Night fell again, and the cabin glowed with firelight, the shadows dancing along the walls. She realized that survival had taken on a new meaning. It was no longer simply enduring hunger, cold, or despair. It was about trust, care, and the courage to accept kindness when it was offered. That night, the mountain man had not taken her in for conquest or pity. He had taken her in to show her that life could still hold dignity, warmth, and hope. For the first time since losing everything, she allowed herself to breathe fully, to relax, to imagine a future that was not dictated by desperation but by possibility. And in that quiet, fire-lit cabin, she understood that sometimes, even in the harshest winters, a single act of compassion could become the start of something enduring, something transformative.